Hello, everyone. I'm Suzanne Dargacheva. I currently serve on the board of the Drupal Association. And I know these days we're all looking for ways to stay connected and really feel a sense of belonging during the current COVID crisis. So our next speaker, Grace Francisco, is going to be sharing some strategies to help us really understand the rapidly evolving landscape for developers. And Grace is a VP of Global Developer Relations and Education at Mongodb. And she also sits with me on the board of the Drupal Association. So welcome, Grace.
Thanks, Suzanne. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, wherever you are dialing in for this very first DrupalCon Global event. I am Grace, and I have had the honor and pleasure of having worked in developer relations for well over 16 years across a number of really large and small companies, from enterprise to fintech to small business, as well as gaming. Now, last fall, I had the honor and pleasure of being invited to be considered to be part of the Drupal Association board. And for me, that was just such a highlight of last year, because it had almost been a decade since the first time I had actually worked with the Drupal community. And I had actually helped with the very first corporate sponsorship through Microsoft with the Drupal Association at that time. I don't think I really knew what a big deal that was until I joined the board, and Jacob Redding was telling me what a big deal it was. So it was really nice to hear that, all things come in a circle and that I can now participate again in this capacity. So it's been really great to be part of the board. And I still had my account, but I was locked out because it was still associated with my Microsoft email account. So thank you, Tim, for helping me recover my old granola account so I can be crunchy once again in the Drupal community. Many thanks. Now, it goes without saying that we are living in really extremely difficult times. And for me, I've been thinking a lot about this book I read actually many, many years ago, Love in the Time of Cholera, which is how I was inspired for the title of my talk. My favorite author wrote this book, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And the other book that I've read from him was 100 Years of Solitude. Highly recommend both. And this particular book is really about this romance between a man and a woman. They meet in their late teens, early 20s. And in the span of 50 years, they're separated by space, time of marriage, war, multiple cholera outbreaks. And actually, you may not know this, cholera was a pandemic itself, and it had 7 incidences in the span of 150 years. Now, in this particular story, in this romance, this couple was separated for 50 years, and they reunited finally towards the end. And this book deals with some really difficult topics about death and aging, death of romance, death of relationship, death in general. And, just facing the hardships of what life is really about, especially in the middle of war and a pandemic like cholera, and also addressing issues of isolation, mortality. So I highly recommend this book. It's very timely, actually, given what we're living through right now. I think about this a lot. I also think about this, the Twilight Zone. Almost every time I wake up, I think, am I still in that Twilight episode? Am I? And so clearly the Washington Post folks felt the same. And someone wrote this article about 7 Twilight Zone episodes that are so appropriate for this time period of ours right now. And eerily enough, the pilot episode, the very, very first episode, is entitled, Where is Everybody? If you watch this episode, I encourage you to watch this. This is available, I think, on Netflix. And you watch that first episode, the guy wakes up, he's in an Air Force pilot's uniform. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know where he is. And he's walking around this town that has signs of life everywhere he goes, but he can't find a single human being. So he's walking around, he sees there's a hot pot of coffee, the stove is hot, and he's going from place to place and seeing these real signs that people must have been there, but they're not there for him. They're all gone for some reason. He has this weird feeling that he's being watched the whole time. And at some point, as his fear escalates, right, this isolation can be really scary, he says to himself, it's time to wake up now. It's time to wake up now. It's time to wake up now. God, I feel that every day. To you, I feel like saying to myself, it's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. And his fear gets even worse. He runs out to the town square and he says, "Where is everybody?" And when I walk out the door, sometimes I feel like that in some of these desolate streets. Where is everybody? That's a question I often ask myself too. Big enemy in this story is isolation, which I know some of you are facing right now and thinking about on a daily basis. And it is hard. And this is something that we have to deal with on a personal basis and work basis. It's a tough time for all of us. And the internet is changing. Well, this pandemic is changing everything in the way that we internet. Particularly, many of us obviously are trying to maintain those social connections. So things like Facebook have skyrocketed. And I don't know about you guys, if you are on Facebook, I see people cropping back up on Facebook that have been there for years as they're seeking that social connection that they usually maintain in person. It's really difficult to do that during this pandemic. And equally so, we're seeing a remarkable number of people going to entertainment sites. So on one hand, we want to connect. On the one hand, we want to forget. So these sites are growing up significantly. Not too surprisingly, mobile app usage has gone down because we're really not very mobile right now. Also not terribly surprising, I don't know about you guys, but when we started shelter in place here, I think I was probably checking the news every 5 to 10 minutes, trying to figure out, what's going on, where the virus is, where is everybody, what's going on, right? So I was checking the news quite a bit, and clearly a lot of other people are checking news outlets quite frequently, just to understand what am I missing? Where is everybody? And I will tell you where everybody is. They're here on Zoom, right? In this Muppet land of Zoom we're all living right now. And, while we're connecting, we're not really connecting the way that we're used to, because is this really the way we want to connect with people? It's interesting. So there's obviously a huge uptick in Zoom usage, huge uptick in other platforms like Google Duo and House Party, things that some of us have never heard of, huge spike in that. But this is a little bit more of what some of us want, this interpersonal connection. But even this one-on-one with Kermie isn't quite, hitting that zone of like really connecting, because as you can see, Kermie's eyes are floating off to a different part of the screen. So you're not making that eye connection. And then you think you're looking at him, but he thinks you're not looking at him. So you're not making that real human connection that you need so badly as you're talking to someone. Very challenging. And as we are all of us taxing our home internet situations to an extreme that none of these internet service providers ever planned for, we're hiccuping our way through internet space and often leaving our Zoom or other platform experiences frozen in time like this because our internet gave up on us in the middle of a meeting. And we often leave these meetings with an expression just like this: Han Solo being frozen in carbonite. This is often what I look like when my internet hiccups on me. And, hopefully it's not when I'm having a meeting with my boss or my peers, because this is not the expression I want to leave with them for the rest of the day. Now, all of that, oh my God, is just really exhausting when you're sitting and looking at a screen all day long, trying to make that human connection that's so hard to do in this virtual format. So I often go out for walks, and I spend a lot of time contemplating the meaning of life, how we're going to connect in this time period with this pandemic, and really, how do we belong in our communities when we can't be face to face like we're doing right now? We're doing a virtual conference. How do we really have those meaningful connections and that meaningful impact together? Of course, then you get home, your furry friends that you've been taking on multiple contemplative walks a day are absolutely exhausted. And really, they're reflecting the pure exhaustion we're all feeling in trying to live this experience this way. This is such a shift in the way that we are working from day to day to day, where many of us are literally sitting in front of a screen having our meetings all day long. Whereas in person, you're hopping from at least room to room. You have at least a few minutes of walking time between meeting rooms, if nothing else. But in this situation, many of us are just sitting, literally just connecting from meeting to meeting to meeting. It is really, really tiring. Now, the massive open online courses, the MOOCs, at some point last year were having some serious decline. And in academic circles, they just didn't see that this kind of concept was going to survive. Well, they are the comeback kids of the pandemic, and they're seeing 7 times the traffic that they were seeing during this pandemic right now. So they're having a huge lift, as many of us are really seeking meaning through learning, right? And we're seeking meaning by learning new programming languages, new disciplines like data science. And interestingly enough, the breakout hit of the pandemic season is the science of well-being, because we're all struggling to keep our sanity during this time period, right? So we're looking for education around how we're going to stay sane as we're sheltered in place, and we can't see eye to eye, we can't be in person, and all these things. And so these MOOC sites are really enjoying a level of traffic and engagement that they've never seen before. And thank goodness that they're there and they offer an outlet for people who really want to learn and really engage in this way. Now, Evans Data put out this forecast last year where we're ending 2019 with almost 24 million global developers in the world, with India outpacing us in 2024. So that's a massive number of developers. But if you sort of calculate all the people sort of shifting careers right now, where our kind of work is so accommodating to working anywhere in the world, working from your home, your kitchen, wherever you might be. And as people are shifting because they have to, whatever work they were doing before was not accommodating to this new world that we're operating in with this pandemic, I expect that we'll be seeing more developers joining forces with us as time goes on. Massive, massive shifts, obviously, to the conference experience. Even the biggest developer conferences in the world, Microsoft, Apple, and Google, either canceled or postponed or virtualized their conference. That's a big, big shift for these massive, massive conferences. And now I show you my favorite picture of fish. Why am I showing you a picture of fish? Well, I show this picture to my teams a lot in DevRel at MongoDB. And this is really about the message around the fact that you can't meet 24 million developers globally in person. So you always have to have a strategy around scaling to the masses of developers that are online globally. So it's really always about thinking about how we scale all the things we do in person to that online format through programs, through community, through content. And so we were already doing those sorts of things, such as making sure there's really great engaging content on our developer hub on developer.mongodb.com. So here we engage with them in written content, sample code, tutorials, our Twitch streams. And, you know, the message to the team has always been about scaling, scaling, scaling. We have forums on that dev hub. And, you know, just always think about how we get to global developers, not just how we get to them in person. Now, I will be honest, though. We miss this. We miss being on a plane, getting to that next destination to go speak in person at a conference. This, we do. We really love this experience. Because nothing replaces the experience of being on stage, doing a presentation, seeing the crowd and feeling the energy in the community and engaging with you this way. It's so hard to replicate this in an online format. This is one of our favorite things to do. And particularly afterwards, the one-on-one questions that we get as you're engaging with us on whatever we spoke about. We miss this. This is so hard. And the thing that I am often reminded of many, many years ago when I was at an open source conference, it might have actually been a DrupalCon conference. Honestly, I had done some kind of talk, was walking around in the hallways, an attendee came up to me randomly and said, "So are you relating yet?" And I thought, what? Oh, right. He's asking me this question because in my title is the word relations, developer relations. So I have been asking myself this question quite a bit recently, which is, are you relating yet? How do we relate in this online format that we're in right now? And to be very honest with you, there's no magic bullet, there's no silver bullet to this. We're all learning as we go. Because really, truly, how do we relate in this Muppet madness that we have to operate in right now? How do we belong when we're so far apart and this is as close as we're going to get? Well, some of us are seeking belonging by really leaning into the things that still matter to us with our technical skills, such as saving the oceans and building applications to help those who are engaged in making sure that our oceans are protected. For some, it's about creating net new solutions in this battle against COVID-19. Great example of that, there are employees from Apple, Alphabet, from Amazon, and from MongoDB who joined forces in partnership with Boston Children's Hospital and Harvard Medical School to build this crowdsourced application so that folks can tell the app if they have coronavirus. And so this allows researchers and medical officials to really understand where the trends of coronavirus are happening in the United States. And so this solution was based on the work that these volunteer employees did and based on and put on MongoDB Atlas, which is our cloud product. And so this was done in literally a week's time frame because they actually repurposed the same crowdsourced solution that was used for Flew Near You. Very relatable type of solution. So they were able to transition this very quickly for the purpose of COVID-19. And here in the Drupal community, the Drupal Association has a high dependency on in-person events, right, for fundraising. And as COVID-19 shut down our event opportunities, that left us with a hole in the funds that the association really needed to operate. And the Drupal Association is really at the heart and core of the Drupal community. And so we ran this campaign around Drupal Cares. We raised $500K in just a little over 30 days with the help of 150 businesses and 2,000 individuals, right? Because Drupal Association is the heart and core of the community. We have to keep that going because you know what? We have people in the front lines of COVID-19 that depend on Drupal and need Drupal as part of the functioning of their business and the work that they're doing in the battle against COVID-19. So that work is meaningful. So if you haven't joined the Drupal Association yet, I encourage you to do it. The minimal that you need to sign up for is $15 US or 15 euros. Please sign up. It'll help the community out. Now back to MongoDB for a second. We have our largest event in the beginning of summer. It's called Mongodb World. And just like all the other conferences, we had to virtualize this really quickly. And so we reformatted it. We called it MongoDB Live. And this is, of course, hard for us as well, because this is the opportunity where we create and nurture that sense of belonging and togetherness, right, for our community of MongoDB developers. But we decided to lean in full on to really reflect the reality of how we're operating today, including having our keynote speakers all in one Zoom-like picture as part of the keynote, because this is the world that we're living and operating in today. And as many of you know and experience day to day, many of us have pets, we have partners, we have children running in the background. And so we closed the keynote with the help of one of our keynote speakers' children. And you can see, you know, the background of one of his rooms, and she's closing out the keynote. And, you know, this is really about the reflection of how we are living and operating today. It is hard, and not everything is polished. And the other thing we wanted to do is to really use MongoDB Live as a platform to educate about Black Lives Matters, because every single day there's social injustice happening to Black Americans from day to day to day that we really need to stop. Now, shifting gears a little bit, I will say, and I always love this, some of the best ideas come from the community. This DevOps conference was just about to be canceled, right? And one of the participants sort of put together this mock-up of a virtual booth and his favorite gaming platform, Animal Crossings, and put this picture up on Twitter and said, hey, check out my booth. And someone else, of course, quickly replied, said, we should do the conference there. Guess what? They sure did. And one of our developer advocates, Adrian, participated in the single track conference that actually reached 8,500 unique users on the platform. And what a great platform to use. If you think about it, gaming platforms are really, really extraordinarily great and set up for scale. And one of the best platforms you can use when you're thinking about massive online engagement scale. And to boot, as you saw in this previous picture, she's wearing Mongodb swag and then created other swag to share with the other attendees. So not quite the same. And everyone came into the theater as their avatar selves, but she was able to engage with them, speak with them, do her presentation, and then give out some swag. Going back to Han Solo for a second here. I feel like this from time to time, where the feeling is that I'm frozen in time, waiting for things to go back to normal. Does this resonate with you guys? Yeah. And it's hard. But the reality is we're not getting back to that normal anytime soon. We're getting to a new normal. And you can see that reinforced with news items like last week, Fujitsu announcing that they are planning for permanent work from home plans for 80,000 global employees, for most of them to be working from home permanently. So that's a big deal. So yes, this is the experience that we're in right now. It's not optimal, but we can be together while we're far apart. And I encourage you to really think about special skills that you have that you can bring to bear in this really difficult situation we're all in. We can continue to make a difference while we're apart. We're in tech. We're so fortunate to be able to work from home and do the things that we do in our remote capacities. We are living in a world full of chaos and hurt right now. So I encourage you to think about leaning in and helping where you can. So whether it's in the ongoing battle against COVID-19, or to help organizations in fighting those social injustices that Black Americans face day after day after day here in the US, or really just continuing to contribute to open innovation and the rights and communities of open source. So if you're done with just learning, and yes, you can keep binge watching, but is that still satisfying? Do you really just want to binge watch all the time? And this is good exercise. Please continue to do this, but maybe you're done with just doing those contemplative walks. Are you relating to this yet? Does this mean something to you? I hope it does. Because we all long to belong, to be part of something meaningful. And together, while being apart, we can truly make a huge difference. Where is everybody? Where is everybody? We're all here. We are all here. Our communities are still here virtually together, and they still need you. We all still need you. The world needs us more than ever right now. And thank you.
Thank you, Grace. We really appreciate the presentation and the handling of all these topics. I have some questions that I'd love to ask you based on some conversation that's been going on in the stage chat. So there's a few points. One is that I think a lot of people, myself included, have been experiencing video conferencing fatigue. Gabor posted an article that suggests that because of the way video conferences work, just the idea of staring at faces for so long stresses our sort of social brains quite a bit in a video context. Is there something that you've done maybe with your own teams to help find ways to create space to recover from that constant feeling of being on those conference calls?
That's really difficult to do unless you have some way of social distancing in person. And I know that like Microsoft just recently released some new version of their I think that it's called their Teams platform, and they're trying to simulate people being in like a theater. I don't think that meets necessarily that kind of demand. I mean, it removes the Brady Bunch feel and the Muppet Land feel, and then transfers it into seats in an auditorium. But it doesn't give you that that human connection that is so badly needed. It's like an innate feeling and need that we all have to be able to see eye to eye. So what I find for presentations, for instance, I have this webcam that sits up on top of my large monitor that I use for work every day. But for formats like this, I find using the webcam on my laptop is actually better because it simulates that eye to eye a little bit better than if you have it on top of a big screen, because then it's looking down upon you and you're not really looking. There's really no eye to eye kind of motion there. So this at least helps with that. So if you're really trying to simulate that eye to eye, like connection, it's better to actually use your laptop webcam, because then you're a little bit closer to having that situation where you're looking at a person and it looks like you're looking at them versus a webcam that's on top of a big screen.
Yeah, and actually on the subject of eye contact, there's a nice conversation going on for people like myself to a degree, and like others who are a little bit on the sort of neurodivergent spectrum. Sometimes we're not used to eye contact in general. And in some ways, we either haven't noticed that we're not getting the same sort of eye contact that we used to, or when we're presented with a lot of people looking at us with all the eyes at once, it can be a little overwhelming. So there's places where it's different from your, where you are on the neurotypical, neurodivergent spectrum, and for just people who learn and interact and socialize in different ways.
I find also a lot of people are doing sort of social happy hour things on Zoom or House Party, whatever platform they're using. And you're completely missing the social cues you usually have in person, that it's okay now to speak. And then someone who's very vocal is just speaking all the time. And at some point during a happy hour I had last week with some old colleagues of mine, this person was like, oh, God, this is hard because I'm missing the social cues of politeness, or it's like time for me to shut up. So, like, yes, there are lots of things that you see, like 50% or more of communication is body language, and you're only seeing this. So, it's hard to see the social cues.
Yeah, I think it's difficult, and I think in some ways we can maybe introduce new temporary forms of body language, like the raised hand on the video call certainly can help just someone get noticed. And I'm sure there's other things that people are discovering and coming up with. I want to go back to something you said earlier about that sense of, it goes along with the sense of video conference fatigue, but also sort of just the generalized sense of fatigue and sort of being overwhelmed, because we simultaneously feel totally disconnected from our societies and our communities in particular, but also feel over-connected to the news and the narrative and the constant updates, whether it's about the pandemic or about the protests or about whatever else is happening. Do you have any thoughts or advice on managing the news feed and taking a break when you feel like you've already been at home all day?
Yeah, so I have a couple of things that I've been learning to do and to adjust in this new world of ours, which is, in the beginning, when we got into shelter in place, of course, just like everyone else, I was consuming whatever news item I could get, because we're just trying to figure out what the heck is happening. But at some point, it was the same, really, or very similar from day to day to day. And you have to put limits. So you have to then set limits on how much you're going to consume, when you consume it during the day. I recommend not doing it before you go to bed, so that you're not having issues going to sleep. So that's one, is setting limits on how much and when you're actually watching that. I think that's really important. I also think that in general, the thing that helps me to offset like feeling bad or feeling stuck or whatever it is I will reach out and do something to help someone, because in helping someone, I feel like I've done something with purpose and something positive. So even if we can't fix all the big world problems, we can do like one positive thing during the day, no matter how bad our day feels. It actually helps a ton to lift us up as individuals to keep going, because we are in a marathon right now, not a sprint. This is not a short-term pandemic, so we have to think about it from that perspective. And so in managing that chaos and how that's affecting us holistically, we need to think about stepping outside of ourselves and think about how can we help others, because in doing that, that actually will help you feel good.
Yeah, and I think I found it useful as well to, one of the things I've experienced is this sense that all of the days blur together when I'm in the same location, the same office, in my house. Like, it becomes hard to distinguish the distance of, was that just when I'm thinking about what happened, am I thinking about a week's worth of time, a day? It all blurs together. And one of the things that has started helping me, I've only just started doing this, is actually journaling some of those individual unique moments, whether it's, oh, this is the day we managed to help out with something, or something else, just so that I have some milestones, some landmarks in the flow of days, to know what's going on.
Yeah. And I try to keep up with the routines that I had before all this happened. And for me, that routine included exercising a certain number of days during the week. Of course, that fell off in the beginning as things were sort of hectic and crazy. But now I'm getting back into that routine, because that, using apps like Headspace, helped me balance my day, because I have a crazy day even without a pandemic happening. So, I'm re-implementing those things because, like I said, it's a marathon. Our work is still hard. It's even harder with the pandemic. And as leaders, we also have to always think about how are we taking care of people. But that's always on my mind. And if I'm not taking care of myself, I can't take care of others, right? So you always have to think about how you are taking care of yourself first, and then also lending a hand where you can with others.
Yeah. I think I'll ask one or two more questions before we probably wrap here. So one is just a really interesting one that you mentioned, a gaming platform being repurposed for community and these sorts of events. And several of our audience members chimed in different ways to talk about these kinds of things that they've seen or participated in other places. So whether it's people setting up maybe just for socializing an Animal Crossing experience, and playing that on the Nintendo Switch, or Matt Saunders passed on that there's a group called the Nonprofit Commons that he had helped found back in the early 2000s that operates in Second Life and has been operating since then, kind of perfectly positioned for the same kind of virtual experience. Do you think that there's something? It's strange because I've seen this in other places, whether it's Twitch or all these other platforms. There has been hey, can we repurpose these gaming social spaces for other kinds of social space when we're isolated? Is there something unique to the platforms built for this gaming experience that you think is why they're so well suited?
What's unique about gaming platforms is from the beginning, they are thinking about scale and performance every single minute of the day, right? Because every minute that they lose, they're losing thousands and thousands of players. They're very data driven in order to be successful. I know this from working at Roblox, so I know how much data you have to work with to understand how are our servers performing, how many users are on the platform, how are we performing globally. Those are things that really great gaming platforms think about constantly. So they are set up for success when it comes to the massive scale we're now inherently asking all these platforms to support when we have big virtual events. So we're taxing the heck out of traditional events platforms, but it's interesting, the gaming platforms are ready to go. The things that they're missing are the things that marketing people are looking for on these traditional events platforms, which is lead generation or marketing components and simulating some. Actually, then you can do this. You can simulate, just like you saw with Adrienne's swag. She had Mongodb swag. She could virtually give that out. So that is possible already on platforms like Roblox. And sorry about that.
All part of working from home. That's just
all part of working from home.
State.
Happening live, and Roblox. So there are components that they're missing, but the scale and performance and the global nature of these platforms is all there and untapped. So I think that as this pandemic continues, I kind of expect that some of these gaming platforms are going to provide some of these experiences, and it provides a nice, engaging experience. So while it's not you, because obviously that picture was their avatar selves, that gave people an opportunity to still kind of feel like they were engaging in a room, being in the theater, seeing a presentation, asking the person questions. She did a simultaneous Twitch stream as well as part of that, so it was sort of like multi-channel. But I think that we're going to see more and more of over the year.
Great. And I saw one final comment in the chat that I just want to share because I think it's good for everyone else to see. It's really important to figure out how you set boundaries between work and personal life when you're in a remote space, when your home is your workplace, whether that is having a home office, if you're fortunate enough to have your own space, where you can close the door and be done with work for the day, or if you have some other ritual you can develop that is how you know that you're done with that particular work. I know for a while when I didn't have a home office, what I would do is have a different user account. I use the same computer for work and personal life, but at least I could sign out of the work one and know, okay, that represented the end of my day. So I hope that's helpful for the audience listening in. Grace, any final remarks for our audience before we close it out? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, we're all learning as we go. Would love to hear what everyone else is trying to do right now in order to stay engaged, to relate to other people. Would love to hear those tips and tricks. Totally with you on the making sure that you set the boundaries in your workspace, whether it's like physically packing up your stuff as if you've traveled to like a hotspot destination and then packing your stuff up. Like, okay, now it's home life. Like sometimes you have to have that rigor to draw those lines and to have that time with your family, your partners, your pets, whatever it is that you like to do, so that you're not just constantly just in your work space. Again, you have to take care of yourselves before you can take care of others. So it's important to think about that.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you very much, Grace. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being one of our board members and helping guide the Drupal Association as we work through this difficult time, learning how to have a remote community event like this as well. We're all very thrilled to have you here. And with that, we'll release our audience to go take a quick short break, set up your next schedules, all of that sort of stuff. Thank you very much for attending, everyone. We're going to stop broadcasting. I'm going to leave it an extra few seconds here, because I think hopefully that way we won't cut off the last few minutes. So we'll have a few seconds of silence and close it off.
Great. Bye.